The night was supposed to be peaceful, the kind of still, quiet evening that had always settled over the small human colony on Larnus IV. Nestled on the fringes of the galaxy, Larnus IV was an unremarkable world, home to families who had carved out modest lives among the stars. The children had finished their evening routines, the laughter and chatter from their play still lingering in the air as they went to bed, unaware that their lives were about to be ripped apart. At the edge of the colony, invisible to the human eye, the Kresh arrived. A species of cold, calculating conquerors, the Kresh had long observed humanity from the shadows. From their darkened ships, cloaked in the silence of space, they deployed their merciless soldiers. Their objective was simple: abduct the young, experiment on them, study their biology, and unlock the secrets of human resilience. They had studied the humans for centuries, believing they were an inferior species, easily manipulated and controlled. They had never encountered an adversary like humanity, and they wouldn't realize their grave mistake until it was too late. The first wave of soldiers hit the colony under the cover of night. Swift, silent, and brutal, they made their way through the sleeping homes, neutralizing any adult resistance with a single lethal strike. The children, unprepared and terrified, were the easiest targets. The Kresh saw them as little more than livestock, to be taken without question. Their weapons flashed briefly in the darkness, knocking out any security systems before the soldiers snatched the sleeping children from their beds. The families never had a chance. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the Kresh had already loaded their precious cargo onto transport ships, their engines humming with cold efficiency. In moments, the aliens were gone, taking the children of Larnus IV to a remote, forgotten corner of the galaxy where no human could reach them. Yet, in the quiet chaos that followed the raid, the colony's adults woke to horror. The screams of parents searching in vain for their children filled the empty streets, their eyes wild with desperation. News spread quickly, and soon, the entire system was abuzz with the word. The children were gone. Not a single human was left unscathed by the loss. And as the first Kresh ship disappeared into the depths of space, the soldiers believed their mission had been successful. They had taken the children, chosen for their innocence and vulnerability. They believed the humans, no, the children, would be nothing more than pawns in their twisted experiments. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The galaxy would soon learn a harsh truth. Humanity, when pushed to the edge, was a force of nature, a predator unlike any other. And the Kresh had made their first fatal error. The children awoke in darkness, a cold, unfamiliar chill creeping over their skin. Their heads ached, their throats dry, and their bodies felt heavy, as if gravity itself had shifted. Ethan groaned, blinking his eyes open to the black void that surrounded him. His sister, Lily, lay beside him, still unconscious, her small face pale under the dim, flickering light that came from some unseen source. The last thing he remembered was the sound of his mother's voice, and then the blinding flash of light when the aliens had taken them. His first thought was to scream, but no sound came from his throat. The panic set in quickly, and his heart raced. Where were they? What was happening? Was anyone else here? He tried to sit up, but his limbs felt sluggish, as if his body wasn't fully responding. A sharp pain shot through his head, and he collapsed back onto the cold surface beneath him. Slowly, other children began to stir in the darkness. At first, it was just low murmurs, soft gasps of confusion. Maya, the oldest of the group, was the first to rise, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She had always been the protector, the one who took charge whenever something went wrong. Even now, with no clear idea of where they were or why they'd been taken, she knew instinctively that panic would do them no good. "We need to stay calm," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible but strong. "Does anyone know where we are?" Ethan's head snapped toward her voice. He had always looked up to Maya, even though she was only a few years older than him. She exuded confidence in a way that made him feel safe, even now, in the midst of their terrifying situation. "I'm scared," Lily said quietly, her voice cracking as she sat up. "Where are Mom and Dad?" Maya moved toward them, her eyes softening. "I don't know, but we're going to figure this out, okay? We just need to stick together." The silence that followed was thick, filled with uncertainty. There were about 10 of them, all from different families, all from different backgrounds, but now they were united by one common truth. They were prisoners. No one had any answers, but they all felt the same cold dread crawling up their spines. They were alone, completely alone, except for the strange noises echoing from beyond their cells. Mechanical clinks, the low hum of machines, and the occasional distant shout from the unseen guards. Something about the sounds made Ethan's skin crawl. This place was more than just a prison. It was a trap. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw his sister, Lily, staring wide-eyed into the void, clutching her knees to her chest. Ethan's heart clenched. He had to protect her. He had to protect them all. But he didn't know how. The walls around them were cold metal, and the air smelled sterile, almost like chemicals. It felt wrong, unnatural. And then he heard it. A faint click, a soft sound that was unmistakable. The locking mechanism of a door. Ethan froze. They weren't alone after all. The click of the door echoed in the cold silence, a signal that they weren't as isolated as they'd hoped. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he pressed his back against the cold metal of the wall. His breath caught in his throat, but he forced himself to stay still, listening. The door slid open with a low hiss, and a figure stepped inside the dimly lit room. Tall and imposing, the alien wore the dark, angular armor of the Kresh, hard and featureless, its surface gleaming with a strange, eerie light. The helmet obscured the creature's face, but the presence alone was enough to send a chill through Ethan's body. The Kresh soldier moved silently, scanning the room with the precision of a predator. It didn't even seem to notice the children, huddled in their corner, eyes wide with fear. The soldier's dark, mechanical eyes flickered for a moment, its sensors scanning the children, calculating something behind the blank faceplate. Ethan's stomach twisted. This was it, the moment they were all waiting for. He'd heard the stories from his parents, from older kids at school. The Kresh were known for their cruelty, their experiments, their cold disregard for life. They were feared across the galaxy, and no one had ever stood against them for long. The soldier took a step forward, and the children instinctively shrank back, but Maya held her ground. She had a different look in her eyes now, one of cold defiance, a look that was becoming all too familiar in the dark. She didn't let the fear show. "What do you want from us?" Maya asked, her voice steady but firm. Ethan stared at her, disbelief spreading across his face. How could she speak to them like that? The Kresh soldier didn't respond. Instead, it reached out a hand, its long, sharp fingers extended toward Maya. But before it could touch her, the sound of a distant screech echoed through the facility, some sort of alarm. The Kresh soldier paused, its head tilting slightly, a momentary flicker of confusion in its otherwise stoic demeanor. The distraction was all Maya needed. With a sudden burst of movement, Maya grabbed the nearest piece of scrap metal she could find, a jagged shard from the broken bunk bed, and hurled it at the Kresh soldier's head. The shard struck with a loud clang, briefly disorienting the creature. For just an instant, the soldier stumbled backward, its hands clutching at its helmet, a weak point that wasn't designed for combat. The children reacted in an instant. Zoe, the youngest, dove for the soldier's legs, knocking it off balance. Ethan scrambled to his feet, adrenaline surging through him. It was chaos, pure instinct kicking in. They didn't know how they'd learned to fight, but something inside them snapped into place. They were not just victims. Not anymore. The Kresh soldier regained its balance quickly, its focus shifting. But the children had already made their move. They weren't the helpless little kids anymore. They were survivors. The soldier reached for its weapon. But Maya was faster. She grabbed a piece of metal, this time a pipe, and swung it like a club. The blow landed on the soldier's arm, knocking it off course. The children, now fueled by fear and fury, pushed harder, forcing the Kresh soldier back. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For the first time since they'd been taken, the children realized something. They weren't helpless. They weren't going to let these creatures break them. They had the strength to fight back. And the Kresh had just made their first mistake. After the Kresh soldier stumbled back, the room fell into an uneasy quiet, punctuated only by the heavy breathing of the children. The metal shard clattered to the floor, and the alien soldier remained motionless for a moment, as if trying to process what had just happened. It was stunned, surprised, and the children knew this was their chance. Maya, holding the pipe like a weapon, took a cautious step forward, her sharp eyes never leaving the soldier's body. But they didn't know how to finish it. They had only acted on instinct, their fear and adrenaline taking control, and now, standing over the fallen soldier, the reality of what they'd just done sank in. The Kresh were not just captors. They were killers. And if they didn't move fast, the children would find themselves right back in their cells, maybe worse off than before. Maya's voice cut through the silence, calm but urgent. We can't keep doing this by chance. We need a plan. The others nodded, their eyes wide and their bodies trembling, but their faces were set with determination. Maya's leadership was something they all instinctively followed. She had a quiet strength that made them feel safer, even in the darkest moments. What do we do now? Zoe whispered, her voice trembling, though there was a spark of something new in her eyes. She wasn't just a scared little girl anymore. Neither was anyone else. I don't know, Maya replied, glancing around the room, her mind working fast. But we can't stay here. We need to figure out where we are, how to get out, and what we're up against. We need to stay hidden until we know more. Ethan, who had been watching the Kresh soldier warily, spoke up. There has to be a way out of here. Maybe we can find a way to the control room. Turn off the locks, disable the security systems. His voice cracked slightly, but the determination was clear in his eyes. He wasn't the scared little boy from before anymore. He was becoming something else, something the Kresh hadn't accounted for. Maya gave him a quick nod. You're right, but we can't do it alone. We have to work together, and we have to move carefully. If one of us makes a mistake, we all pay the price. Her gaze swept over the group, and she could see that they understood. They'd been forced to grow up fast. Okay, Maya said, her tone firm. First, we need to figure out the layout of this place. We need to know where the guards are, where the doors are, where the weak spots are. Ethan, Zoe, you two will start looking for any map or schematics. Lily, you're good with technology. See if you can get access to any systems from here. The rest of us will keep an eye on the soldier, in case it wakes up. Ethan swallowed hard, nodding in agreement. As they split up, moving quickly but quietly, a new sense of unity filled the air. They had no idea what was to come or how they would survive, but one thing was clear. They would not be passive prisoners any longer. They were in this together, and together they would find a way out. No one had told them how to survive. They would teach themselves. They were a team now, and they would learn to fight, not just for freedom, but for each other. The Kresh had no idea what kind of force they had just unleashed. The air was thick with tension as the children worked quickly, their movements precise despite the fear that still gripped them. Ethan and Zoe scanned the walls for anything that resembled a map or a sign of escape. Their eyes darted from corner to corner, as though the very walls were watching them. Meanwhile, Lily was bent over a console, her fingers flying across the controls with the quiet confidence of someone who had tinkered with computers more times than she could count. Maya kept watch, her sharp eyes never leaving the doorway, while the others prepared for whatever came next. Lily's voice broke through the silence. I found something. Access to the central system. But it's locked down. There's a code. Her brow furrowed as she tried a few different sequences. It's not impossible to crack. But I need more time. Maya's jaw tightened. How much time? Lily didn't look up from the screen. If I push it, the whole system could go into lockdown. We'd be trapped. She paused, hesitating. But if we don't try now, we might not get another chance. Maya glanced at the others. They were ready. She could feel the growing sense of unity among them, the resolve in their faces. They didn't have much choice. Do it, Maya said, her voice resolute. Lily nodded, biting her lip as she inputted the final sequence. The console blinked green for a split second, then flashed a warning. Asterisk unauthorized access detected asterisk, before the entire room shuddered. The lights flickered once, and then the hum of the security systems went silent. I did it, Lily whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. The main security grid's down. We can move. Maya's heart raced as she motioned for the others to gather. Move quickly. We need to find a way to disable the internal locks. Ethan, Zoe, and the others began moving, forming a tight circle around Maya as they moved down the narrow hallway. The Kresh soldiers, they knew, would not stay distracted for long. They were dangerous, methodical, and they would retaliate with brutal force. The children had no illusions about the stakes. If they were caught now, the Kresh would make sure there was no escape. As they moved deeper into the facility, they encountered their first real obstacle. 2 Kresh guards standing watch outside a reinforced door. The children froze. They had expected this, but facing real danger was different from imagining it. Maya took a deep breath, her mind racing. Stay low, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She nodded to Ethan, who had become their most agile member, quick to think on his feet. Ethan crouched, his small body slipping behind a large, discarded piece of equipment. With quick, deliberate movements, he crept toward the guards, keeping to the shadows. The others held their breath, watching in silence. He reached the first guard, and without hesitation, grabbed the back of his head and slammed it into the cold metal wall. The guard crumpled, silent and unconscious. The second guard spun around, too late to react. Zoe, who had been silently moving up behind him, leaped and kicked the soldier's legs out from under him. The Kresh fell to the ground with a thud, knocked out cold. The children exchanged looks of disbelief. They'd just taken out 2 Kresh soldiers, without a fight. Maya exhaled sharply. That's it. We're moving forward. Stay sharp, stay quiet. No more mistakes. They pressed on, their newfound confidence growing with every step. They were no longer just fleeing. They were fighting back. The Kresh had underestimated them, and now they were about to learn that the children of Larnus IV were far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The hallways of the Kresh facility were eerily silent as the children moved through them, their footsteps muffled by the metallic flooring. They had just dispatched 2 of the guards, but the adrenaline still pulsed through their veins. They knew this was just the beginning. Each corner they turned could bring another soldier, or worse, an alarm that would send the whole facility into lockdown. Maya led the group, her senses sharp. With each passing second, her mind raced, calculating their next move. They couldn't afford any more distractions. They needed to reach the core of the facility, the control room, where they could access the systems and get out. We're getting close, Maya muttered, her voice low and steady. The faint glow of emergency lights illuminated the walls as they approached a large, reinforced door. The entrance to the control room. Ethan stepped forward, feeling the weight of the moment press against his chest. How do we get through this? He was young, but already his voice had grown serious, steady. The situation was demanding it of him. Lily stepped beside him, her eyes scanning the door. I'll need to bypass the security locks. Shouldn't be too hard, but it'll take a minute. She pulled a small, makeshift device from her pocket and started working on the door's console, her fingers flying over the interface. Outside, the hum of the facility was growing louder. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Any minute now. the creche could discover the breach. He turned to Maya, whose expression was grim. "We're almost there," Maya said, her voice clipped. "Once we're inside, we disable everything. Communications, alarms, the locks. If we do this right, we can control the whole facility." Zoe, who had been standing watch, whispered urgently, "I think I hear something." Maya's head snapped up, and the group froze. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Creche soldiers, a lot of them. "Lily," Maya said, her voice strained. "Hurry." Lily's fingers moved faster, the screen flickering as she bypassed a security measure. She cursed under her breath as the door flashed red, indicating a fail-safe had been triggered. But she didn't stop, her brow furrowing in concentration. The footsteps were getting closer. Maya counted in her head. 1 more second, just 1 more. And then, the door slid open. "Go!" Maya barked, and the children rushed through, squeezing into the control room just as a group of creche soldiers rounded the corner. The room was dark, filled with rows of consoles and glowing screens. At the far end was a large control panel, with systems that could shut down the entire facility. Lily didn't hesitate. She rushed to the panel, her hands shaking, but her mind focused. "I'm in," she said, breathing heavily. "I'm locking them out." Behind them, the sound of creche soldiers shouting orders echoed in the hallway. They were seconds away from storming the room. "Do it now, Lily," Maya shouted, her eyes darting to the door. Lily slammed her hand onto the final key. The screen flashed green. The alarms went silent. The creche soldiers outside stopped, confused. The children exchanged nervous glances. The first battle had been won. But now, they were on the clock. "Let's move," Maya said, her voice fierce. "We've got 1 shot at this." They had breached the core, and they were not going to stop now. The creche had underestimated them before. Now, they would make them regret it. The creche soldiers outside were disoriented, the facility's alarms now nothing more than an eerie silence. But the children knew this was only a temporary victory. The creche would regroup. They would find a way in. It was a matter of time. Maya's eyes swept over the room, noting the large central console and the blinking data screens surrounding them. It was clear that Lily had gained access, but she needed time to fully disable the facility's lockdown systems and clear a path for their escape. Maya motioned for the others to stay close. "We've got to move fast. Lily, can you get us access to the outer door? We need to get out before they resecure the whole place." Lily, her hand still hovering over the control panel, nodded. "I'm working on it, but it'll take a minute. I can't promise no more surprises." Zoe, eyes wide, scanned the shadows of the room, listening for any sounds of the creche coming closer. "What if they know we're here? What if—" "Focus," Maya interrupted, cutting her off. "We're not going to wait around and get caught. We fight if we have to, but the plan is to leave before they know what hit them. Trust Lily." Lily shot her a grateful glance, though her face was pinched with concentration. "Just a few more seconds," she muttered, her voice tight with stress. Ethan paced the room restlessly. "How many of them do you think are out there?" Maya shook her head. "Doesn't matter. The more we wait, the worse it'll get. Stay sharp." The children huddled around Lily as she worked. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked furiously, trying to override the facility's lockdown systems. Ethan and Zoe kept watch at the door, their faces tight with tension, while Maya studied the central control panel, noting the flashes of data scrolling across the screens. It was a dangerous game they were playing, but they had come too far to back down now. Finally, with a soft beep, the central screen flashed green. "I'm in," Lily said, a hint of triumph in her voice. "The door's open. It's not pretty, but it'll get us through." Maya exhaled a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Good. Now let's go." They filed out of the control room in a tight formation, moving quickly but quietly through the darkened hallways. The map on the console had shown them a route to the main exit, but they still had to navigate through the heart of the crash facility. It was a labyrinth of corridors, with each one potentially filled with soldiers waiting to stop them. The children's nerves were raw, their hearts pounding in their chests. But Maya's voice cut through the tension. "We're not running anymore," she said firmly, her eyes locked on the hallway ahead. "We're fighting our way through." Just then, they heard it. The sound of boots echoing through the corridor, growing louder with every passing second. The creche had regrouped, and now they were coming for them. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. This was about survival. And the children of Larnus IV were ready for whatever came next. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridors, growing louder with every passing second. The creche were close, and this time, they wouldn't make the same mistake. Maya's pulse quickened, her mind racing. There was no more room for hesitation. The children had come this far. There was no turning back now. "Get ready," Maya whispered, her voice sharp, yet calm. "Stay in formation. No matter what happens, we stick together." They moved quickly, ducking behind corners, keeping to the shadows as much as possible. The hallways were filled with the hum of machines, the metallic clang of doors opening, and the muffled sounds of distant voices. It was clear the creche were preparing for a sweep of the facility. They weren't going to let their prisoners escape again. Ethan gripped his improvised weapon, a metal rod he'd scavenged from the hallway, his knuckles white from the pressure. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a fighter. But after everything they'd been through, he had learned quickly what it took to survive. Lily, still carrying her makeshift tool to hack into the security systems, glanced over her shoulder. "The main exit's close," she said, her breath steady despite the chaos around them. "We just need to get through the next 2 security checkpoints." "How many guards?" Zoe asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "At least 4, Lily answered, her eyes flickering over the monitor she had hacked into. "They'll be waiting for us." Maya clenched her jaw. They had no choice. The creche had no idea what they were up against. They had been underestimating them from the start. And now, with the element of surprise in their favor, the children were ready to show the creche what they had truly awakened. Suddenly, the hallway ahead was lit by a series of flashing lights as a creche patrol turned the corner. The soldiers were armored, their weapons raised and their eyes scanning for any sign of movement. They hadn't seen the children yet, but they would. Maya motioned for the others to hold still, her heart pounding as she waited for the perfect moment. The soldiers were moving in their direction, too close for comfort. Then, it happened. Without warning, Maya sprang into action, charging toward the nearest soldier with a yell. The sound of her voice was like a signal, and the children followed, springing from their hiding places in a blur of motion. Ethan swung his metal rod with all his strength, knocking one of the soldiers off balance. Zoe, small but fierce, lunged at another guard, tackling him to the ground. The creche soldiers reacted quickly, but they were outnumbered. In the chaos, Maya managed to wrestle a weapon from one of the guards, a sleek alien gun that felt cold and heavy in her hands. She aimed it at the remaining 2 soldiers, who hesitated, momentarily unsure of their next move. "You shouldn't have underestimated us," Maya growled. The soldiers' confusion lasted only a second before they lunged forward, but it was too late. The children were already on top of them, working together like a well-oiled machine. The fight was over almost as quickly as it had begun. Breathing heavily, Maya looked back at the others, her eyes shining with pride. "That's how we do it." Lily quickly disabled the final security system, and the main exit door slid open with a hiss. Beyond it, the harsh light of the outside world flooded in, dazzling and blinding after days in the facility's dark corridors. As they stepped through the door and into the open air, Maya felt something shift inside her. They had done it. They had escaped. But more than that, they had proven that the creche, these so-called conquerors, were not as unstoppable as they believed. The children had become something else, something stronger. And the galaxy had just learned that humans were not to be trifled with. As they ran toward freedom, Maya couldn't help but smile. They had won. And now, they were going to make sure the creche never forgot the reckoning they had just faced.